South Polar presence, and their ability to outfly anything the Americans could confront them with. Some of the planes were shot directly by the saucers. Others were hit by beam weapons. They didn't know what hit them. Third, collided with invisible barriers and disintegrated in mid-flight by reports of other planes nearby, which was obvious that the Germans had already installed the force field shields around their colony. This whole operation was meant to show to that faction of the American military that, well, see guys, we can't do anything because they are a lot more powerful than us. Only the highest circles of the American government and the members of the secret societies knew that actually the German presence on the South Pole will become a joint project between Russia, United States, and Germany. In the German colony there. And secretly they would be involved in the future projects of space flight for anti-gravity, time travel. The Germans developed the time machine much earlier than the Americans did. They did so with the nuclear bombs too. The rumor is, in one of the tapes that we did with Al Bilik, Al talks at length about stories that actually the two bombs dropped over Hiroshima and Nagasaki were German-made, that were captured in the underground caves by the Americans. The American bomb was made of a giant howitzer barrel where they would shoot at each other two subcritical masses of plutonium. It was so heavy that no bomber could lift it in the air. That's why the original design was to come hide it in a ship or on board a submarine, take it inside a port and explode it there. And there's a very interesting story that came to my attention, a very strange explosion in Fort Chicago, which is north of South San Francisco, about half a year before the supposedly first test at Alamogordo. According to rumor, there were two unsuccessful tests before Fort Chicago where the bomb couldn't go critical. It was a flop. And the Fort Chicago was the first successful test of an American nuclear device. It was hidden on board a ship that was loaded with ammunition by 300 black servicemen. And they all departed with the explosion. There are researchers that have very carefully investigated the whole story. They claim that it was a nuclear explosion. There was no chunk of metal that was found of the ammunition ship or of the ship that was anchored across the bay or from a 20-ton locomotive, diesel locomotive that was parked on the tracks. Not a single big enough chunk was found. They were basically disintegrated. This could never happen by a normal ammunition explosion. Plus, it was a white fiery ball. When ammunition explodes, the most you can get high up in the temperature is either reddish or orange, or the most it will be yellowish gaseous ball. This was a white gaseous ball. But it was still a flop because it produced a tidal wave of only 30 feet, which is about 10 meters, 3-story tall tidal wave. No big deal. I mean, any small boat would send that, not to say a word about giant battleship. They realized that if they take such bomb in a Japanese harbor and explode it, it wouldn't do much damage other than drowning whatever number of sailors on the... There would be damage, but nothing compared to the Hiroshima bomb. Anyway, stories that the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bombs were German-made, and that at the time the Germans were working on a pineapple-sized bomb, according to Al Bilik, big enough to destroy London or New York. We know that you cannot do that with a nuclear bomb of that time. One would not be enough. My suspicion is that such a small bomb could be made only either with the element 115 that was given to the Germans by the little Greys or by some other alien race, or by antimatter. And Hitler decided not to use these bombs Probably by the same reason that he decided not to kill all the British that were left stranded at Dunkirk at the beginning of the war.
He didn't really want war with England anyway. Hitler didn't want war with England to begin with.
Not only that, but when his generals proposed to smash all the Brits there, he said, no, gentlemen, you're missing the big point. We are not fighting, we are not in war with Aryans. We are not in the business of killing Aryans. Hitler was after a lot higher targets, goals of levels that border on the alien presence on the planet and the presence of celestial management structures that go way beyond the terrestrial small-time politics. He was in the business of killing Slavs, that's for sure. That was the reason he decided not to bomb London or New York, after all. We have discovered here that they had the ICBMs ready at the time, and if the nuclear bombs were ready, I mean, all these cities could have been obliterated just with 2 shots. Anyway, in this documentary film came also the information about a giant naval warfare size craft, the Honeybull 3 craft, that was 74-meter diameter, which is about 220 feet diameter. This is bigger than a football field. It was armed with 1, 2, 3, 4 naval caliber triple gun turrets, and it was meant to fight whole armadas, weighing probably many thousands of tons. Only one of these craft was built, and at the end of the war, Germany decided to make a final desperate attempt to win one more alien support to their cause. So they departed on a search for alien partners on a no-return suicide flight to Mars. The extremely strong electromagnetic field of the drives was making the alloy brittle only after several months of flight, and they knew that the craft would not be able to land on Mars and then come back to Earth again. So a large crew of volunteer German and Japanese officers were chosen, and the craft departed in April 1945, a month before the war ended in Germany, for Mars. Because of the low level of automation on board, probably a lot of the things were done manually, so they needed a large number of crew. But with a limitless free energy on board coming from the color converters, they could afford to do electrolytic purification of the air, of the water, to take the urine and to recycle the water. And with some hothouses, they could produce their own vegetables and food. Drawings of a much larger craft, this is probably 150 to 200 meters diameter, probably 500-600 feet diameter, were also found on the drawing board. This was armed by double-decker gun turrets, smaller calibers underneath, bigger calibers above. This may even be a triple-decker gun turret here with the machine guns on top, a second and a third deck, and a double-decker turret on top, without the authors of the film being sure whether this project was pursued or not. But the drawings were there. And this is a drawing of the planet Mars with the Honeybull 3 craft approaching. Because of the weaker gravitational field of Mars, Mars has a smaller diameter than we do, and of the weakened alloys of the drive system, they couldn't squeeze the top power from the color converters, and they couldn't crank the power of the anti-gravity drives high enough. They were worried that they may just disintegrate. On top of that, the Martian atmosphere is thinner than the terrestrial atmosphere, but fully breathable. So they couldn't use